So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever happens to be while you're watching this. So, coming to you from another hotel room, out on the road traveling, out here in the Pacific Northwest today. So, had some time, so I figured I'd do another, hopefully, quick video. So, I've got some observations and some questions, and I hope I'm not the only one who has these kind of questions. So, I'm going to verbalize them. I'm going to put them out there and see what y'all think. These are not rhetorical questions. These are questions I have that I don't have answers to, and some observations that kind of tie into the question. So I'm going to give a rundown, put these questions out there, and see what we can find. So first, we'll start with some background / observations. When the pandemic first started, we had basically four groups of people. We had people that who never caught COVID, had no symptoms, they were not asymptomatic, negative tests, just never caught the virus. Okay. We had those that had caught COVID but were asymptomatic, meaning they had no symptoms, no visible symptoms, no runny nose, cough, whatever, right? No lack of smell, just asymptomatic. The only way they knew they had COVID is when they tested positive for it, right? And then we had so that's group 2. Group 3 was another group of people that caught COVID and had very mild symptoms requiring little to absolutely no medical treatment, right? They didn't have to go to the hospital. They didn't take any medication. They just, ate chicken noodle soup, drank hot tea, and a couple of days they were over it. They had the loss of smell, the loss of taste, but very mild symptoms and didn't require any medical or very little medical attention. So that's group 3. So never caught it but were asymptomatic with no symptoms, caught it very mild, no real mild symptoms requiring little to no medical treatment, right? So then we had a fourth group. These are the people that caught it and had very severe symptoms. These are people that required medical attention, hospitalizations, up to and including people put on ventilators, and some of those people ended up passing away from it, and some of them ended up recovering from it. So of those people, over 80% of them globally all had comorbidities. So the first three groups never caught it, no symptoms, caught it mild symptoms, were not comorbidity people, typically. There were some exceptions here and there, but for general rule, they were just regular people. So the people that caught it had severe symptoms and ended up having to go on ventilators or passed away from it. Over 80% of them, and technically it's 85%, but I'm being generous and saying 80, were comorbidity people. People with hypertension, people with diabetes, people that were overweight, people with kidney problems. Those were kind of your big ones. So those people caught it, required extensive medical care, ventilators, or whatever. During that same time frame, remember, HCQ or hydroxychloroquine was not authorized as a treatment, right? People couldn't use it. People were banned off social medias and up to and including doctors from putting that out there as a treatment for COVID, right? Because it went against the WHO and all that bullshit. Ventilators were a huge problem because over 80% of the people that caught COVID and were put on ventilators ended up passing away from it, which goes back to the HCQ, hydroxychloroquine. The reasoning for it is because ventilators didn't treat the actual disease, right? So I hope I sparked some of your memory. So in speaking of the people that passed, what did they actually die of? Okay, I say that because on a death certificate, if you die from the flu is not written on your death certificate. Pneumonia, heart attack, heart arrhythmia, whatever, the actual cause of your death, the actual heart stopping, not being able to breathe because of the pneumonia in your lungs or whatever, or the cessation of brain activity is what's listed on the death certificate as the primary cause of death. The secondary cause of death would be the flu, or it would be gunshot to the, whatever, right? But the primary cause is what actually causes your death. Your heart stops, you can't breathe, your brain ceases to function. That's what's put on your death certificate prior to the pandemic. After the pandemic, COVID was actually written on the death certificates, not pneumonia, not your heart stopping, not lungs failing to take in oxygen and transfer it into your red blood cells or whatever. It's just like COVID, which is odd. But anyway, so I say that's just questions I have from the original pandemic. Okay, so fast forward a little bit to December of 2020, January 21. That's when the vaccines were developed and starting to be pushed out. People were starting to get the vaccines. Okay, so to start with, the manufacturers of the vaccines were indemnified by the federal government from being sued for any side effects, medical complications, death from their vaccine. So if you were a perfectly healthy person, never caught COVID or have, asymptomatic, whatever, but you never had any issues with COVID, and you went and got the vaccine, and 2 days later you died due to medical complications from whatever's in the vaccines, your family couldn't sue the manufacturer for a defective product. And it still holds to this day, July of 2021. You cannot sue the manufacturers of any of the manufacturers of the COVID vaccine due to any medical complications created as a direct cause of the vaccine. Okay, so December 20, January 21, vaccines are pushed out. The manufacturers are indemnified for being sued. Also, there was kind of a conflict of interest because the NIH held patents for a vaccine dating all the way back to 2008, 2009. How many of you knew that? Dr. Fauci had applied for vaccines, but he was actually denied because what he was applying for was not enough of a variant between what was already given a patent and what he wanted. So anyway, so there's some conflict of interest stuff that not a lot of people are aware of. Oh, and by the way, Chapel Hill, the University of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, had a patent for a COVID vaccine. This is going back to about 2018, if I remember right. The NIH or NIADA, Fauci, assumed that patent from University of Chapel Hill, North Carolina in 2018, 2019. So if, just sidebar, if the federal government sponsors research at a university, and using this kind of example, and they come up with something that's patentable, the University of Chapel Hill, North Carolina would apply for the patent and receive the patent. But because their funding was from the federal government or a federal government agency, the federal government can assume or take control of that patent. That happened with University of Chapel Hill, North Carolina for a SARS-CoV vaccine in 2018. The research was sponsored and paid for by, or they were given grants by the government, the NIADA, Fauci. And in 2019, Fauci did an emergency, it's an emergency something or other, and they now assumed control of the patent of the vaccine for SARS-CoV in 2019. I digress. So, since the vaccines have been pushed out, we've been getting some conflicting information. We've been told that you can't get COVID after a vaccine, which would stand to reason because a vaccine, the way the vaccines typically work is a sample of a dead sample of the virus is injected into your body checks it out, your body develops antibodies to fight against you ever getting that disease or virus again. Okay, so we were told once you're vaccinated, you can't get it. And then we were told a month or so, 2 months later, oh yeah, so you can get COVID even though you've been vaccinated, but it will reduce the severity of the symptoms. So it doesn't prevent you from getting the disease, which is the definition of a vaccine, but it'll lessen the symptoms. Well, I'm sorry, doesn't that make that a COVID treatment? Like cold medicine? Cold medicine, when you get a cold and you take, Tylenol or NyQuil or Dayquil or whatever, it doesn't prevent you from getting a cold, but it reduces your symptoms. So it's called a treatment, not a vaccine. Well, if this vaccine doesn't prevent you from catching COVID, but it lessens the symptoms, wouldn't that be considered a treatment? Anyway, so keep in mind, this is all prior to the Delta variant coming out. We'll touch on that in a little bit. So you can't get COVID once you're vaccinated. Well, yeah, you can get it, but it'll reduce your symptoms. Everyone needs to get vaccinated. The whole 70% Biden by July 4th bullshit and all that stuff, right? We were told kids under 12 or kids 12 and under, yes, they should get it. Then we were told no, kids 12 and under shouldn't get it. And then we've recently been told kids under 18 shouldn't get it either. But originally we were told everybody should get it, to include children, to prevent you from getting COVID. Well, I mean, reduce the symptoms if you do catch it, because you can still catch it even though you're vaccinated against COVID. Anyway, so my questions now start with this. Prior to vaccinations, this is during the early stages of the pandemic in January of 2020, February, March, April, right? We had people that had caught COVID but were asymptomatic, have no symptoms, whatever, but they tested positive for COVID. Okay. That's category 2. Category 1 is people that never caught it. Category 3 were people that caught COVID but just had little to no or mild symptoms, required little to no medical treatment. They were given chicken noodle soup and hot tea and sent on their way, and they got over it. So we have vaccinated people that are still catching COVID but have mild symptoms. And we're being told that the vaccine reduces the severity of the symptoms. So my question is okay, hold on, time out. Prior to vaccines, we had people that caught COVID and had mild symptoms. Post vaccines, we have people that have caught COVID, even though they're vaccinated, but had mild symptoms. Isn't that the same thing? Prior to vaccines, people caught it, had mild symptoms. Post-vaccinated people are still catching it but having mild symptoms. How are they not the same thing? So pre-vaccinated or pre-vaccinations, people caught it, had mild symptoms. Post-vaccination, people catch it and have mild symptoms. But we're being told that their symptoms have been reduced because of the vaccination. How do we know that? If prior to vaccinations we had people with mild symptoms, and post-vaccination we have people with mild symptoms, how do we know for a fact that those vaccinated people would have been in the severe group had it not been for the vaccine? Because prior to vaccines, we have people that had caught COVID but had mild symptoms. How do we know? What is the medical documentation? What are the tests done? What is the proof that the post-vaccinated people, those that had received the vaccine but still caught COVID but only had mild symptoms, how do we know for a fact, beyond a reasonable medical doubt, that they would have had more severe symptoms? I ask because prior to COVID, before vaccine, we had people that caught COVID but had mild symptoms. How do we know that the vaccine reduced the symptoms? So if people prior to vaccinations were people that had never caught it, people that caught it but had severe symptoms requiring extensive medical care, and now vaccines came out, and then we have a third category people of caught it but mild symptoms. Okay, reasonable jump of a reasonable thought, reasonable logic that the vaccine reduced the severity of the symptoms, because prior to it was either you didn't have it or you had it with severe symptoms. But prior to these vaccines, we had people with mild symptoms that they required little to no medical care. But now we have post-vaccinated people that catch COVID. Post-vaccine people catching COVID that have mild symptoms, and we're being told that because of the vaccination, those symptoms have been reduced. How do we know that? Where is the medical documentation to prove that those vaccinated people would have been in the severe category if they hadn't received the vaccine? Anyway, so we move on a little bit now to the Delta variant. The Delta variant. So we're being told that a lot of the breakthrough cases of people that have been vaccinated that are catching COVID, they're actually catching the Delta variant. Okay. Which specific test? The antigen test, the antibody test, the PRC tests are being used to distinguish between somebody who has caught the regular original COVID or they've caught the Delta variant. So if I go to Walgreens or CVS or whatever COVID testing center and say, hey, I want the test to make sure I don't have the Delta variant. As a matter of fact, give me two tests. I want a test to show that whether I do or do not have regular SARS-CoV-2, and give me the other test to make sure I don't have the Delta variant of SARS-CoV-2. Does that exist? Does it? What tests are being done specifically to delineate between SARS-CoV-2 and Delta? Because we're now being told that a lot of the breakthrough cases of people catching COVID after being vaccinated is Delta. How are they getting that information? What specific tests are being ran on an individual that has caught COVID post-vaccination to determine that they have the actual new Delta variant of SARS-CoV, or they caught the original strand post-vaccination? What specific tests are being ran? You might know. We've all been told this, and it's being repeated and repeated and repeated. And people are saying, "Oh yeah, it's the breakthrough cases are Delta." Well, what test proves that? You might know. I don't. So, what tests or studies are being done to prove that the post-vaccinated people? Oh no, I'm sorry. Rewind that. So right now, we have two main groups of people: people that have been vaccinated and people that have not been vaccinated. Right? We have those two groups. Those are basically how the globe is divided right now. Okay. Of the non-vaccinated people, we still have the same four categories of people: never caught it. I'm strictly talking about those that have not been vaccinated. Okay, those that never caught it, those that had it but were asymptomatic, those that catch it or caught it and were mild symptoms requiring little to no medical treatment other than chicken noodle soup and hot tea, and severe cases. Right? Those are the non-vaccinated groups of people. Of the vaccinated people, have not caught it. Don't hear so much about asymptomatic, do you? So that's not really a category, allegedly, with the Delta variant, excuse me. Caught it with mild symptoms, required little to no medical treatment. Do we have people that are post-vaccination with severe symptoms? They're out there. They exist. You just don't hear about it. I digress. So, now, in specifically talking about the Delta variant, viruses. Viruses mutate. It's a known thing. However, when they mutate, typically, when a virus mutates, it becomes more contagious, but less lethal. A virus wants to procreate. It wants to survive. It wants to have children, raise children within the host body, and let, have the 2-story house with the picket fence and the dog. So, if a virus is deadly, it kills the host. Well, literally every virus contained within that body will perish because the host perished, right? So natural selection being, we're killing ourselves, so we want to procreate, so we're going to become more contagious. We're going to become rabbits, right? but let's chill out on the killing of the host, because it's not helping our cause. So viruses mutate. It's a natural thing. It's a natural phenomenon. When they mutate, they become more contagious, less lethal. So the Delta variant, as we are being told, is a natural mutation of SARS-CoV-2, which we're also being told, sort of, that it's less lethal. More contagious, less lethal. Is there a vaccine for Delta? No? We have the vaccines for SARS-CoV-2, but now we have the Delta variant. It's all in the news, right? Does the current vaccines protect you against the Delta variant? Well, apparently not, because we're being told that a majority of the breakthrough cases, those that have been vaccinated and diagnosed with positive COVID, are the Delta variant. Although we don't know which tests they're using to prove that, but I digress. So, do we need a Delta variant vaccine, or let's just say a booster shot for the vaccine that we've already gotten to protect? Why would we need to? So, SARS-CoV-2 has a 98%, and I'm being very generous with this, it's actually higher, recovery rate. 98% of people that catch COVID, SARS-CoV-2, recover. They can be people that were asymptomatic, mild symptoms requiring little to no medical treatment, those with severe symptoms that required extensive medical treatment but recovered. Okay? There are 3 groups of people. 98% recovery rate. According to natural science, viruses that mutate become more contagious, less lethal. So the lethality of Delta will be less. There'll be more people with it who catch it, but the lethality will be less. So we'll go from a 98%, and again, I'm being very generous with this, 98% recovery rate to over a 99% recovery rate of people that have caught Delta. Do we need a vaccine? Do we need mask mandates again? Do we need to lock down again for a virus that is less lethal than the original, which had a less than 2% mortality rate? Of the 2% mortality rate, over 85% globally had comorbidities, i.e. hypertension, diabetes being the big 2. kidney disease being, or some kidney issues being the third. Do we really need this? Do we? But we're going to start locking down. LA just did it. There's talks of several other states that are going to get mask mandates coming back, even though masks don't work, or they do work, depending upon who you ask and what day of the week it is and who's in what office, whether they're Republican or Democrat. They mask. Anyway, if the current vaccines don't protect against Delta, do we need to have a Delta variant vaccine or booster? What happens when we have an Echo variant or a Foxtrot variant or a Golf variant, a hotel variant? Because the virus, if SARS-CoV-2 is not an engineered variant or virus, excuse me, if it's a naturally occurring zoological virus and it mutates, it'll become less lethal. The next mutation, which in our case we're talking would be the Echo, right? If they follow linguistically, it'll be more contagious, less lethal than Delta, which is more contagious but less lethal than SARS-CoV-2. Fox, Golf, Hotel, whatever, it will follow that pattern. That is nature. That is the science for you science denier motherfuckers. Or you follow the science. Believe and trust the science. That's the science. That's the science. Viruses mutate, become less lethal. Do we need vaccines? Are we gonna have to get, when we get to the Zulu variant? Are we gonna need another, the 26th booster to the vaccines? Do we? Are we gonna need to persecute and blackball those that rewind it? So right now, those people that have not received the vaccine are being ridiculed, and they're science deniers, and they're going to be there's already things in the works. Government can't mandate vaccines. It's constitution, right? But they can put pressure on you, i.e. your employer says if you want to work in this facility, you have to get the vaccine. That is legal for employers to do. If you want to go to a concert, you have to show proof of vaccine. You have to show me your papers. I did a video on that a while ago. You may want to look that one up. So, fast forward to the Zulu variant. Let's say I have the vaccine, but I only have the Delta booster. I stopped getting boosters after Delta. Am I the science denier? Am I going to be prevented from going to concerts or flying on an airplane or not having to wear a mask when I go into work because I'm vaccinated, but only up to the Delta variant? We're now on Zulu variant. If you don't have the Zulu variant, you have to wear a mask and wear a face shield and a rubber suit. We're gonna do that? Are we? Are we gonna get to that as a society? So and I'm okay. This ended up not being a quick one, but whatever. It's me. It's how it happens. How it works. Remember when the pandemic started? There was the death tracker and cases. Constantly on CNN and all of them, Fox included, had the tracker. So they're talking about the sunflowers that grew in Miss Jones's garden, but right in front of you was the COVID tracker thing, right? Is there a separate tracking mechanism for all these Delta variant cases? So, is there a tracker that tracks people that are still catching and getting the SARS-CoV-2 the virus? And then is there a tracker that anybody has that says, okay, these 10,000 people, whatever, are caught SARS-CoV-2. These 4,000 people or whatever caught the Delta variant. Is that being done anywhere? Is there a death tracker of separated by whether you're SARS-CoV-2 or Delta variant? Why not? It's so important. It's so the key to maintaining the society. Well, aside from white supremacy and the environment, and the ice caps melting, and Bezos going to space. It's because he's going to destroy humanity because he went to space. Why aren't we tracking them? Why isn't there a SARS-CoV-2 tracker on CNN like we had back in March, April, May, March, April, May timeframe of 2020? Why don't we have a Delta variant? Tracker daily new cases, deaths, and why don't we have that? I hope I make you think. It's kind of what I like to do. I like to make people think. And I hope you're going. I I didn't think about that. If you did, then I've hit my target. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a good night, good day, good morning. Deuces.